Hello everybody, it's Purgatory here bringing you my very first YouTube video on the Cycle Frontier. Thank you so much for checking it out, and I'd love for you to leave a like, comment, and subscribe at the very end. Tell me what you think, tell me what I can do differently, what I've done good. I'd love to hear it all. Any constructive criticism, it's good to me. I decided to bring you my very first video on the Cycle Frontier, just going over all the changes that have happened during Season 1. And, well, how it's going to impact Season 2. So many players have dropped out throughout the season, and, well, for good reason. The hacker epidemic hasn't really gotten better. If anything, it just has seemed to have gotten worse. However, you'll see in the later updates that devs have done some things to, well, alleviate the pain anyways. There's been quite a few changes that have changed the meta throughout the season, quite drastically. So, starting with patch 1.3, they didn't do too much in terms of the meta, but they really brought the DMRs back into play. A big fault the DMRs had was they still had a fall off damage, so although they were good at range, their damage was falling off and you just couldn't get an idea of exactly how much you were doing, unless you were using a sniper, the bolty, or the arbiter. But this update, and it also reduced the recoil of the lacerator, making it quite a staple. All the DMRs for that part have become quite a solid primary weapon to use. You know exactly how much damage you're putting in when you hit that armor, and it's nothing but a solid push when you get a good headshot. And following that, we got the very much needed 1.3.5 update. This update did a lot of things to change the meta. One, giving SMGs a little buff, reducing the horizontal recoil, and a movement speed reduction for ADS from 35% to 25%, which isn't a big deal, but it's pretty much like an attachment, so you can consider it quite a buff. The shotguns, yeah, if anyone remembers that trench gun in the beginning, well, that was fixed quite early. Base damage being dropped down to 80 to 64. Pretty much dropping the damage of each pellet by 20%. That monster was sent down back where it belongs, at the bottom. The Maelstrom got a bit of a buff. Nothing really to praise over, but that's when the Bulldog started to reach its decline. The refire time was increased, and the spread was increased as well to really match the other shotguns, because that gun was incredibly broken. The grenades also received their first much needed nerf as well, increasing the time it took to throw them consecutively. Really stopped players from spamming them like they used to. And that's only the first of the nerfs. I'm sure we're glad for all of them moving forward. Next we have patch 1.3.8. This was huge for the MMR, introducing the 4 bucket system, giving the players a good idea on exactly where they were at in the MMR in the game and what kind of players they were going up against. In terms of weapon adjustments, this gave the Bulldog that increased spread by 30%. After just being matched with the other shotguns, this puts it at a bigger spread. Definitely where it needed to be, considering how cheap it was and how destructive it was. There was no point in not running one back in the day. This is also where the Advocate got reworked with the recoil pattern. That went from 0 to 100. That thing is a monster now. Definitely where it needs to be. Thankfully those SMGs got a little buff too, reducing the horizontal recoil on the Flechette and the Brute. Patch 1.4 was a great patch. First it starts with a little salt on the wound, you know. Jaeger giving us a little care package for the trouble we've been dealing with to these hackers. The items we received weren't quite what we lost, but it was a start, and they certainly done some patches later on to make up for it. Some of the biggest balancing and economy tweaks we see though is the cost of beacons going from 200 down to 80 for scripts. This is huge. If you take into consideration the old cost was 2.5 times as much as what it is now. The dire left explosives also required for the orbital cannon was reduced from 6 to 3. This is also huge. It's one of the hardest materials to find for that. The core lev also being reduced on the smart mesh has made the beacons a hell of a lot cheaper this time in the season. Unfortunately, a lot of players have already crafted their beacons with the scripts they received from the missions, but next season it's safe to assume we'll be receiving much more beacons for those scripts. Another huge part of this update was the gear cost being repaired. That used to be way too expensive, to the point where it wasn't even worth running. I remember taking out an exotic set, losing 40% of its durability. Cost around 60k to repair. Now after this update, it cost me less than 10k. Definitely a much needed update, giving players much more incentive to bring their gear out as to before. And it's also where we've seen the grenades taken out of the store. Yes, that was a huge patch and we all like that. 1.5. This is the latest patch players are enjoying. It was the first, shouldn't say the first, it's the second step they did for the cheaters compensation. Definitely the much better one though. We're starting to receive our kits back when we die to hackers. People were a little skeptical at first, but I'm sure now a lot of players are really enjoying seeing those blue or purple kits pop up in their inventory. A lot of big players too, seeing those arbiters show up. It's definitely been huge. The damage on grenades was also reduced by 20%, which was the final nail in the coffin. I think they're in a good place now and I don't see them getting nerfed again. Got to thank Jaeger for taking the time to look throughout the season at what players been doing, what they've been using, and changing that meta to fit. I think it's great. Thank you all so much for sticking to the very end. Here's a link to my Discord. Become a fellow Purgatorian. We'd love to have you. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. I can't wait to see you guys at the next video.
Go, hustle hard, hustle every single day. I'll be making moves till I'm buried in my grave. To the system, I don't wanna be a slave. I've been doing shit my way, or the highway.